We all know the story. In the heart of ancient Alexandria stood a magnificent library holding the sum of all human knowledge. A beacon of enlightenment filled with hundreds of thousands of scrolls. And then, in one catastrophic fire, it was all destroyed, plunging the world into a dark age. The burning of the Great Library is a tragedy we all think we know. But what if that story is mostly a myth? The truth is far more complex, and in many ways, more tragic. There was no single cataclysmic fire. The real history of the Library of Alexandria isn't a story of one bad day, but a slow, agonizing decline that stretched over centuries. It's a story of ambition, bitter politics, intellectual purges, and simple neglect. A story of how the greatest intellectual project of the ancient world wasn't destroyed in a blaze of glory, but just faded away. Let's unravel that myth. We'll uncover the library's truly revolutionary mission and reveal the multiple events, the series of cuts and blows that led to its ultimate heartbreaking disappearance. The vision and founding. To understand the library, you have to understand the man whose vision started it all, Alexander the Great. In 331 BCE, he founded a city that would bear his name, Alexandria. He imagined a cosmopolitan hub, a crossroads where Greek, Egyptian, and Eastern cultures would meet. He wouldn't live to see his dream fully realized, but he laid the foundation. After Alexander's death, Egypt fell to one of his most trusted generals, Ptolemy I Sota. Ptolemy was more than a soldier. He was a historian who shared Alexander's vision. He wanted Alexandria to be the undisputed cultural and intellectual capital of the world, outshining even Athens. To do that, he needed more than grand temples. He needed a center for knowledge. The idea might have come from an exiled Athenian statesman, Demetrius of Phalerum, who had studied under Aristotle. Together, they imagined an institution dedicated to the Muses, the Greek goddesses of the arts. They called it the Museion. The Museion wasn't a museum as we think of it. It was a revolutionary concept, more like a modern university or a state-funded research institute. Think of it as the ultimate ancient think tank. The geographer Strabo described it as a magnificent complex with covered walkways, lecture halls, gardens, and a large dining hall where scholars could eat, debate, and share ideas. And these scholars, over 100 at the library's peak, were given a remarkable deal. They got a generous state salary, tax exemptions, and free room and board. Their only job was to think, research, and push the boundaries of human understanding. At the very heart of the Museion was its library. While Ptolemy I laid the groundwork, it was his son, Ptolemy II, who truly brought the Great Library into being in the early 3rd century BCE. The mission was simple, yet breathtaking. Collect all the knowledge of the world, every book on every subject from every culture. The Golden Age. With the full backing of the Ptolemaic treasury, the library began its relentless quest for knowledge. This wasn't a passive collection, it was an aggressive, state-sponsored campaign. Royal agents were sent across the known world with huge sums of money and clear orders. Buy or acquire every text you can find. The library's acquisition methods were famously ruthless. It was decreed that any ship docking in Alexandria's port had to surrender its books. Scribes would then meticulously copy the scrolls. In a bold move that speaks volumes, the original scrolls were kept for the collection, and the fresh copies were returned to their owners. These confiscated texts were marked in the catalogue with the note, "From the ships." In another famous story, Ptolemy III persuaded Athens to lend him the official state copies of their great playwrights, Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, offering a massive silver deposit as collateral. He had the plays copied onto the finest papyrus, but then he sent the copies back to Athens, forfeiting his deposit to keep the priceless originals. The collection grew at an astonishing rate. While the exact numbers are lost to history, most estimates suggest the library housed anywhere from 40,000 to 400,000 papyrus scrolls at its peak. Some ancient writers even pushed that number to a jaw-dropping 700,000, though that's likely an exaggeration. The collection got so vast it outgrew its space, and a daughter library was established in the nearby temple of Serapis, the Serapeum. But this was more than a warehouse for scrolls. It was a dynamic center of innovation. For the first time, scholars could compare different versions of the same work, check for errors, and create standardized editions. The first head librarian, Zenodotus, began the monumental task of organizing Homer's works, essentially inventing literary criticism. His successor, Callimachus, created the Pinakes, a 120-volume catalogue that was the world's first library card catalogue. The minds drawn here produced breakthrough after breakthrough. This is where Euclid wrote his Elements, a geometry textbook used for over 2,000 years. It's where Eratosthenes calculated the circumference of the Earth with stunning accuracy. It's where Aristarchus first proposed that the Earth revolved around the Sun, nearly 1,800 years before Copernicus. Doctors made groundbreaking discoveries in anatomy, and inventors like Hero of Alexandria conceived of gear trains and even a primitive steam engine. According to legend, it's also where 72 Jewish scholars translated the Hebrew Bible into Greek, creating the influential Septuagint. For about 2 centuries, the Library of Alexandria wasn't just a library. It was the intellectual center of the universe. The slow decline. That golden age couldn't last forever. The popular story blames a single fire, but the library didn't die in a blaze of glory. It suffered a death by 1,000 cuts, and the decay started from within the Ptolemaic dynasty itself. The beginning of the end can be traced to Ptolemy VIII Physcon, a cruel and paranoid ruler who came to power in 145 BCE. He saw the foreign-born, independent-minded scholars of the Mausion as a political threat and launched a brutal purge. Many were exiled, some were executed. This triggered a brain drain from Alexandria. The head librarian fled to Cyprus, and other leading thinkers scattered across the Mediterranean, founding new schools in cities like Rhodes and Rome. This was a turning point. The generous royal patronage that was the lifeblood of the Mausion began to dry up. Later, rulers were more concerned with civil wars and the growing power of Rome than with funding a library. The focus shifted from intellectual supremacy to political survival. The position of head librarian, once given to the most brilliant scholar of the age, became a political prize handed to loyal cronies. As Rome's power grew, Alexandria's influence waned. Rome became the new center of ambition, and while the Romans respected Greek learning, they had little interest in funding a massive research institution in what was becoming a provincial Egyptian city. By the time Cleopatra died in 30 BCE and Egypt became a Roman province, the Great Library was already a shadow of its former self, weakened by decades of neglect and instability. The stage was set not for one final blow, but for a series of damaging events that would slowly erase it from existence. Addressing the burning events. So what about the fires? You can't talk about the library without talking about them. While no single event was the knockout blow, a few incidents are often blamed for its destruction. It's time to look at the evidence. The most famous suspect is Julius Caesar. In 48 BCE, Caesar was in Alexandria, tangled up in a civil war between Cleopatra and her brother. Besieged in the palace, he ordered his men to set fire to enemy ships in the harbor. Ancient writers like Seneca claim the fire spread and destroyed 40,000 scrolls. For centuries, this was the story. Today, however, historians are skeptical that this fire destroyed the main library. For one, Caesar himself never mentions it in his own account of the war. A strange thing to leave out. It's more likely that warehouses near the docks containing scrolls burned, These could have been books waiting to be catalogued or intended for export. The strongest evidence that the main library survived is that the geographer Strabo wrote about working there around 20 BCE, nearly 30 years after Caesar's fire. The fire was undoubtedly a tragic loss, but it seems to have been a blow to part of the collection, not the annihilation of the entire institution. The library was wounded, but it survived. The centuries that followed were rough on Alexandria. The city saw more conflict, and in the 270s CE, a Roman attack destroyed the royal quarter where the Museion and the main library were located. If anything of the Great Library was still left by then, it was almost certainly destroyed during this conflict. But the story isn't over. Remember the daughter library in the Temple of Serapis, the Serapeum? By this time, it was the largest collection of books in the city and a major center for pagan learning. Its end came not from war, but from religious conflict. In 391 CE, the Roman Empire was Christian. Emperor Theodosius V issued a decree to destroy pagan temples. The zealous patriarch of Alexandria, Theophilus, led a mob to the Serapeum. After a tense standoff, they stormed the temple, smashed its idols, and tore the magnificent structure down. A church was later built on the ruins. Did this destroy the Great Library of Alexandria? No, the Great Library was almost certainly long gone. But it did destroy the daughter library, its spiritual successor and the last great collection in the city. Over time, this violent, religiously motivated destruction likely merged in the popular imagination with the story of Caesar's fire, creating the myth we know today. Finally, there's a much later story that the Caliph Omar ordered the library burned after the Muslim conquest of 642 CE. This tale is almost universally rejected by modern historians as a fabrication, likely invented centuries later as propaganda. By 642 CE, there was simply no great library left to burn. The story of the Great Library is a powerful reminder of how fragile knowledge can be, not just in the face of fire, but against political instability, changing ideologies, and simple neglect. Understanding the real, complex history gives us a much deeper appreciation for the work of historians who piece together the past. If you enjoy separating historical fact from fiction, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you don't miss our next deep dive. So the Great Library of Alexandria wasn't destroyed in one epic fire. Its end was slower, messier, and far more human. It was born from an incredible vision, flourished in a golden age of discovery, and then bled out over centuries. A victim of purges, budget cuts, civil wars, and religious intolerance. Caesar's fire was a blow. The destruction of the Serapeum was the violent end for its daughter. But the Great Library itself simply faded away. The loss is no less tragic for being gradual. The knowledge within those scrolls, countless works of which we have no other record, is lost to us forever. We can only guess at the secrets and stories that vanished as the papyrus crumbled. Yet the library's legacy endures. It remains a powerful symbol of intellectual ambition and the human quest for understanding. Its story is a timeless cautionary tale about the importance of preserving knowledge. And in a way, its spirit has been reborn. In 2002, the Bibliotheca Alexandrina, a stunning modern library, opened near the site of the ancient one, a conscious effort to revive the old dream. The Great Library may be gone, but the idea it represented, that all the world's knowledge should be gathered, shared, and celebrated, is more alive today than ever before.